Hi, I'm Josh, and I am both grateful and astonished that you would join me as I talk about some punk rock music. This is something I feel like I haven't done in forever, mostly because I think this is only the second punk show I've been to since about 2019, due to certain world events that have been happening over the past few years. And it's even been several years before that since the last time I went to just a tiny little punk show with local no-name bands that I've never heard of before, which is what I went to on Friday evening. I follow this Facebook group that is basically just kind of local punk, metal, hardcore stuff, and I saw they were having a show that evening, that I was free, the kids weren't around. I thought, oh, let's go out to a punk show. So I did. There were 4 bands and I had a good time. But one quick note about my shirt first. If you want to check out a new album that I've discovered that's quickly become one of my very favorite albums of all time, check out this band with a terrible name called Bad Music, B-A-D-D Music. I think their album is self-titled, but every song on it I absolutely love.
She likes my style, will be like those stars. And the way you move and walk and talk, you really caught my eye. And this old type bar with cheap cigar feels so smoky air, you wanna go to a better place, I know. No one's listening at all. 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 And there's bombs on the wall. No one's listening at all. No one's listening at all. She makes the devil scared. She talks so innocent.
You can see the vocalist takes a lot of inspiration from Tim Armstrong, but if you can get past that kind of copycat vocal style, the music of the tunes is just really amazing. As far as I can tell, they're a relatively new punk band from California, and they're definitely worth checking out if you're into that type of music. So let's talk about these other bands though. The first band of the evening was a band called Welland Wasted from Welland, Ontario, which is out kind of towards Niagara Falls, and they describe themselves as a powerhouse powder keg of complete and total musical destruction, a band that delivers punch-in-the-head music for punch-in-the-head people. As you can see, this is kind of an unusual venue. It's essentially a Legion-style veterans hall. There was an elderly woman serving drinks at the bar, and there were a bunch of kind of long tables set up off to the side of the room with chairs where I got to sit and relax for most of the evening. And throughout the course of the evening, it became clear that with the 4 bands that were playing, there were maybe around 15 or so musicians present in the building. And besides that, there was maybe roughly an equal number of audience members who weren't in the bands that were playing. So, you know, roughly 15 musicians, 15 of us who were just there to watch. And so it was a tiny crowd in a tiny, interesting venue. The next band to perform were called the Essential Letdowns, with members from Kitchener and Guelph. They describe themselves as esoteric power trash. one thing that's nice about these little shows, it's just nice to be amongst local people who look like me, fellow punks and misfits and outcasts. Although I can guarantee you that I was the only one in the entire place who brought an 800-page fantasy tome to read in between bands. I had left it in my car on the off chance that there would be enough light between sets for me to pull it out and do some reading, and sure enough, after the first band played, I was like, yeah, I could definitely do some reading in here. So I went back to my car, snuck it in my jacket so that I wouldn't have to answer any awkward questions about what I was bringing into the venue, and I just sat in my little chair at the table and read my book between songs, just sitting there with no friends reading my book. Well, you know, it's just the way I am, I guess. But anyhow, the Essential Letdowns were really great. They were just this three-piece punk band that unfortunately the lead singer slash bassist was having issues with the strap on his bass guitar. It kept popping off and he seemed a little bit too wasted to do any intricate problem solving, so he just eventually set his bass aside and just did his vocals while the guitar and drums accompanied him, which was too bad because he was obviously an excellent bass player and I was just really digging the sound of their little three-piece outfit there. So I really enjoyed Welland Wasted. They were very high energy, as you could see, put on a great little performance for the tiny crowd and the little venue they were in, and I thought they did a great job. The third band were called Laager from Kitchener, and they describe themselves as crust metal punk. So the one problem with little wee shows like this with tiny crowds of 20 or 30 people is that there's not really much of an opportunity to get a mosh pit going and really kind of get in on the experience of enjoying the music in that way. Yes, there are your kind of 2 or 3 particularly drunk guys who are sort of half dancing, half stumbling around, occasionally bumping into people. And then those people that got bumped into, we get mad and shove them back, which I can see both sides of that. On the one hand, I'm like, yeah, it would be annoying to have some drunk guy just running into me when I'm just standing there trying to enjoy the show. On the other hand, you're at a punk show. So it's gonna happen, so whatever. I know in looking back at some of my previous punk music videos that I've been quite critical of the drunk spectators, which isn't really fair of me just because alcohol isn't my drug of choice. It doesn't really give me the right to criticize people who enjoy it. My personal hang-ups really come from my paramedic career in 16 years of working on ambulances, especially on night shifts. Just a very, very high percentage of our calls, I would guess just off the top of my head, more than 50% of our ambulance calls on night shifts had to do with alcohol in some way, shape, or form. And so we would show up on these scenes to help these drunk people, and if we were lucky, they'd be somewhat cooperative. Often they would not be cooperative, and sometimes they would even physically attack us, and I would have to fight some drunk idiot. That and the fact that they were just so often puking on us, on our stretcher, in our ambulance. And no, we don't have cleaners who come and clean up our equipment in our ambulance for us. That's the job of the paramedics to clean up all that puke afterwards. So I really, over the years, started to develop a real hang-up with drunk people, probably rather unfairly. I myself am not straight edge by any means. But anyhow, when a couple other people would sort of jump in and join the 2 or 3 drunk people and start to get a little bit of a mosh pit going, I would kind of jump out of my seat and go in there and get it in on the pit a little bit. But I tell you, ever since catching the plague at the end of October, yes, I know that that particular illness messes up your lungs, but it feels like it's done something to my heart, because anytime I exert myself, I can do it just for a very, very short time, and then all of a sudden I just hit this wall where I literally feel like I'm having a heart attack. I just get this tightness in my chest. I can't catch my breath. I start getting dizzy and sweaty, and I just feel like I'm dying, and that's after just the tiniest bit of exertion. So yeah, I got in there a couple of times and kind of danced around a little bit, but couldn't do it for very long. So anyhow, this band Laager, they weren't my style. It's not the type of music that I would put on in my car or anything like that. They were fun to watch live, as most bands are, but yeah, not really my style of music. The fourth and final band were a band called Maldita from Toronto, and they described themselves as a Latina-fronted hardcore punk band. So speaking again about drunk people, there was a point where one of the noticeably wasted guys I noticed was kind of standing face to face with another of the audience members, and it was clear they were not happy with each other. And I saw the other guy at one point smack the guy up the side of the head, and at that point I took off my glasses and was getting ready to stand up and step between them, because I'm not at all cool with fighting happening at punk shows. Because I mean, if us punks and misfits and outcasts of society can't get along amongst ourselves, then what hope is there for us? There's just, for me, no place for that kind of violence at punk shows. Yes, a mosh pit is inherently a violent activity, but it is a consensual, fun, joyful violence where people are looking after each other, to the extent where if somebody falls down to the ground, other people around them will pick them up or hold people back so they don't get stepped on, and people are looking after each other in that setting. So that's not an angry, harmful kind of violence per se. But I don't like it when actual fighting breaks out. So I was just about to stand up and step between these two guys when I could see, just by kind of watching their lips move, the really drunk guy goes, want to go outside? And then the other guy totally calls him on his bluff. He goes, yep, and he just starts making a beeline for the exit to the place. And then the drunk guy kind of stands there for a second and is like, all right. He turns around and follows the guy out. So I was like, at that point, I was like, I mean, looks like they're gonna take care of it off premises, which is, if that's what you want to do, that's the appropriate way to do it. So I just put my glasses back on and enjoyed the show. So unfortunately, Maldita couldn't play for very long because there seemed to be a hard cutoff time for the venue at midnight, because they were really putting on a great set. Their Latina vocalist was high energy and putting on a great performance. It seemed that she was singing partly in Spanish and partly in English. And generally the crowd was getting more into the kind of idea of moshing. At that point they were kind of loosened up enough and drunk enough to want to at least make an effort of the mosh pit. And so that's where I kind of went in for the second time, and until I felt like my heart was going to stop beating. But then at midnight sharp they shut down, turned the lights on, and I grabbed my book and off I went back home again. So it was an enjoyable evening overall, and I, as always, want to hear about music from you. It doesn't have to be punk rock. Whatever it is you're into, what are you listening to? Have you discovered any new bands lately? Myself, I'm so stuck in the 90s and the knots in terms of my musical tastes that for me to find a band like Bad Music here that really knocks my socks off is so rare. So I'm always curious to hear, what are you listening to? What are you recommending? What's something you found recently? Please do let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. If you could just, what was I going to say? I have this Facebook book. I follow this and it's certainly a band that delivers punch in the mute. I kind of